which is up there. And I believe it shows the rest of the school committee meetings and also the B-Space meeting dates and also the graduation dates for our schools, if I'm not mistaken. So I hope that you're all going to visit all of the graduations of all of our schools. We look forward to seeing you there. Yes, Ms. Shalupski.
I just wanted to remind people on June 15th, the Brookline Mental Health Center is having their gala at the the Museum of Fine Arts, and it should be a really fun evening, and tickets are going fast.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a consent agenda tonight as usual, and very quickly I'll just say that it includes the record of, with the record being the minutes of our May 21st meeting. It also includes a signature authority for the summer months when a number of us from time to time will be away, but there are still things that we have to authorize. And also one out-of-country student trip for Brookline High students to Mexico, which runs from February 15th through March 1st of 2014. It's a trip which has been going on now, I think, for at least 9 years. So having said that, do I hear a motion for approval of the consent agenda? Thank you, Ms. Stone. And a second? Thank you, Ms. Scotto, and welcome. If there's no discussion, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. And those opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
I'm abstaining from the minutes, please.
Okay.
I wasn't here at that meeting.
Well, very good, Ms. Kershaw. Thank you very much for reminding us of that. There is one other item under administrative business, and that has to do with the affirmation of the superintendent's approval of one out-of-state student trip. The Brookline High School Boys Crew actually departed this morning at 8 a.m. For Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And so the superintendent will be in deep trouble if we don't approve his approval of that. The reason that we couldn't do it sooner is that nobody knew that the boys were going to qualify for the nationals out there. And so I think it's at least my own opinion is it's a legitimate way to handle it. Thank you, Dr. Lupini. Oh, my pleasure. So I would welcome a motion to affirm the superintendent's approval of the out-of-state Brookline High School Boys Crew to Oak Ridge, Tennessee for the U.S. Rowing Junior Nationals between June 6th and June 10th.
Please.
Thank you, Ms. Kershaw. And do we have a thank you, Ms. Cox? Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, raise your hands. All those opposed? You're off the hook, Dr. Lupini. Okay, staff recognitions.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Mr. Morris. It gives me great pleasure to be able to participate this evening in the recognition of educators who have been with us here in Brookline for 30 years. We have a large and distinguished group of our educators who are here who have devoted their careers to the students and the community here in Brookline. And it is my honor to be able to honor them here this evening with the words of, for the most part, their principals or coordinators who have written what I'm about to read to you about each of them. So we'll start with Deb Allen. Don't look so shocked that we're starting with you. Congratulations to Deb Allen and her 30-year commitment to the public schools of Brookline. Deb is a legendary 7th grade science teacher at the Devotion School. An advocate for students and teachers alike, Deb is a respected colleague, mentor, teammate, and leader within the union. After 30 years, Deb continues to maintain a passion for science and working with middle grade students. She continues to challenge herself as a teacher and embraces change to curriculum and technology. Deb's students are excited to learn and participate and are often seen huddled around their beloved teacher and raptured by science. Her former students describe her as having high standards for student performance, adding that she does fun activities and we learn a lot in science class. Deb Allen is an exceptional teacher, colleague, and friend to the Devotion community. We thank Deb for her dedication to Devotion School and Brookline community for these last 30 years. Deb Allen. Deb Allen and the Devotion Posse. Kate Donnelly. Kate Donnelly has been a nurse for the public schools of Brookline since 1983, with service initially split between Pierce and Lincoln schools, then full-time at the Pierce School, and finally she has been the coordinator of student health services since 2006. There is much about Kate that her colleagues admire. She is a superlative clinical nurse. She is kind, caring, extremely intelligent, and a wonderful colleague. Brookline was once a community with only part-time nurses in each K-8 school. Kate has worked tirelessly to ensure that our model became a full-time nurse in every school as the demands for nursing services has grown. Her everyday tasks include coordinating nursing services for all 8 schools, speaking with parents, advocating for students, writing guidelines, and updating services to students. Each year, Kate writes a grant to fund nursing and health services, the Essential School Health Grant, which is a multifaceted task that she undertakes with fervor and tenacity. She took on the methodical task of reviewing the Brookline Health Policy and Procedure Book to ensure that all the nurses were practicing within contemporary medical guidelines. Kate is always willing to support her fellow nurses in problem solving and identifying solutions to the problems they confront on a regular basis, both social and emotional. It is a rarity that a person in her position is so fully admired and appreciated by her entire staff, but that is how her staff genuinely feel about Kate. Here's what one Pierce parent said about Kate. When my daughter was diagnosed in kindergarten with a hearing loss in one ear, the first thing I thought of was the open classroom structure at Pierce and how it would affect her hearing and thus her learning. It all worked out fine in the end thanks to the help of many Pierce people, but Kate was my emotional support. She understood how overwhelmed I felt by this out-of-the-blue diagnosis and how my concern was compounded by the open classroom setting. We went into her office the very next day after my daughter was diagnosed and talked, and I cried for over half an hour. It made me feel so much better to know that she understood how I was feeling and to get her much saner, unclouded perspective on the situation. Kate Donnelly. Sima Kirstein. Matt Saul, the Massachusetts Association of Teachers of Speakers of Other Languages, has named Baker School's Sima Kirstein as this year's Teacher of the Year. Ms. Kirstein holds undergraduate and graduate degrees from Boston University in English Literature and English as a Second Language. Sima began her teaching career in Brookline in 1983 at Devotion School as a Hebrew bilingual teacher working with Israeli families. She joined the Baker staff in 1998. During her early years at Baker, Sima worked extensively with Russian students and their families. As the demographics of the Baker School District began to shift, so too did Sima's student population. While her teaching extends to students from all over the world, she now works with many Korean students and their families. In fact, she recently traveled to Korea to visit her former students and their families. Naturally, she was warmly embraced and celebrated. Her professional work extends beyond the K-12 classroom. For 15 years, she has served as a cooperating practitioner for student teachers attending Boston University. She is also the director of the Children's English Language Institute, a summer program that provides language instruction for children who need to learn and improve their English language skills. Further, she is a state-approved Category 2 trainer, an adjunct professor at Wheelock College, and was most recently accepted, yay, to be a retail instructor for Massachusetts. Thank goodness. She has successfully facilitated district-wide ELL and content-specific professional development, chaired a variety of committees, and served on task forces, all in an effort to enhance the educational opportunities of English learners. Ladies and gentlemen, Sima Kirsty. Maria Marrero. Maria embodies the same love of history, culture, language, and people as her very name suggests. Maria, a version of the name Mary, is deeply rooted within many cultures, even as far back as the ancient Egyptians. Oh, we're in trouble now, turning this over to Bill. Even as far back as the ancient Egyptians, who used Marai to mean beloved. Maria has a passionate heart for learning and has engaged in many intellectual pursuits to give her an in-depth understanding of many cultures, including the Teachers as Scholars seminars, primary source programs, and has traveled to both China and as part of our Sister City project here in Brookline. Maria has a servant's heart and truly is called to serve others. She has participated in METCO conferences, led professional development sessions, presented at the MSAN conference, served on the ELL program review committee, and Runkle's Principals Advisory Team, Runkle's School Council, Runkle's Equity Team, Runkle's Asperger's team. Most importantly, Maria has a nurturing, caring heart for her students. She continually strives to reinvent new ways to reach all of her students, such as creating new visuals or manipulatives, experimenting with voice threads, and has carefully selected web-based programs to assist students in ongoing learning practices at home as well. There are times when Maria has needed to advocate for her students and speak with parents about delicate adolescent issues or the possibility for additional support services for learning issues that arise. She has also reinvigorated a love of poetry at Runkle by restoring the tradition of Poetry Night and started Wednesday's poem on the morning announcements. It is not as common now as it once was for individuals to remain in one place for a long time. How lucky we are that Maria has chosen to make the public schools of Brookline and the Runkle School her home. Maria Marrero. Bob Miller. Principal Fluwilling, you did a lot of writing, didn't you? Where are you? There you are. Congratulations to Bob Miller and his 30 years of service to the students and families of Brookline. Bob's 7th grade English class is described as a rite of passage by students and teachers at the Devotion School. Students look forward to being part of the world Bob creates, and they talk about their experiences for years to come after grade 7. Bob is a showman, funny, dramatic, and engaging. He holds high expectations for his students and supports kids in achieving high standards. Students know he does not let anyone off the hook and will spend hours and hours working with kids after school to ensure that they master the skills and content required to succeed. He is a respected colleague and teammate who advocates for children. Each year, Bob works closely with the PTO to identify students in need of summer camp scholarships. His commitment to this cause has resulted in countless student placements in summer camps over the years. Bob's students note that he is, quote, very skilled at basketball. He likes to joke, and he likes MC Hammer. Many thanks to Bob for his service to students and families during his 30 years with the public schools of Brookline. Bob Miller. Shelley Morgenstern. Congratulations to Shelley Morgenstern and her 30-year commitment to the public schools of Brookline. Shelley is a talented and valued literacy specialist. She is incredibly knowledgeable, and with a quiet confidence, Shelley always gets the task done. She is a mentor who is quick to share ideas, creative solutions, and advice with new teachers. Shelley is a true professional who also contributes to the positive climate of the school community. She hosts our annual Red Sox opening day staff breakfast, a tradition she carries on from days long ago when her husband Jim was a fourth grade teacher at Devotion. Each year, Shelley dons her Red Sox jersey and dutifully tends the fruit smoothie bar, a faculty favorite. Her colleagues have always appreciated her fine sense of humor. A great friend to colleagues, Shelley is caring, thoughtful, and quick to help a friend in need. Shelley is observant and understands the strengths and needs of kids and teachers. As a teacher leader in the K-8 literacy team, Shelley applied for and secured a BEF literacy grant to support professional development in reading instruction. She serves as co-chair of the building-based literacy team and is a strong advocate for teacher learning. We thank Shelley for her dedicated service to students and families of Brookline for the past 30 years. Shelley Morgenstern. Peter's not with us, is that what you said? Okay, Peter Schlossberg couldn't make it to be with us this evening, a Devotion School visual arts teacher. Let me read you what was written about Peter. Congratulations to Peter Schlossberg and his accomplished 30 years instructing art in Brookline. In Peter's class, students have the opportunity to imagine, create, explore, and discover themselves through art. Inside Peter's classroom, student masterpieces don the walls and tabletops, masks, sculptures, and drawings representing the children's vision of their world. Peter connects with children of all ages. His students report, "I enjoy talking with him. He jokes around a lot and likes to have fun, but when it's time to get serious, we do." He chooses fun art projects like making mummy masks or plastering your hand. He picks projects that kids like to do. We celebrate Peter in recognition of 30 years of service and look forward to his work with students for many years to come. Peter Schlossberg. Roberta Scoff. Roberta's love of teaching health and fitness began in Brookline, where she did her student teaching during the 1979-1980 school year. She learned from Ron DiFincenzo at the high school and Donna Schreck at Pierce School. It is not surprising that excellent Brookline teachers come from excellent Brookline teachers. This experience was where Roberta began to develop her strong work ethic and sense of pedagogy. After receiving her master's degree in corrective therapy and adaptive physical education, Roberta worked for a year with our K-12 students who were physically challenged. After working briefly as a substitute teacher in the physical education department at BHS, Roberta was hired as a teacher and never looked back. Other than a brief move to Lawrence and Devotion for 1 year, she has been teaching at the high school ever since. Roberta has a strong philosophy of instruction, plans meticulously, and works hard to offer her students background knowledge and experiences that will allow them to make healthy choices throughout life. Roberta often uses her culinary skills to bring her students healthy muffins and fruit salad, which of course they thoroughly enjoy. She also became the first health and fitness teacher to offer our Achieving Health Through Yoga course, a class that has continually increased enrollment in recent years. Roberta teaches our early morning swim class, where her students consistently become strong swimmers, and many of them move from non-swimmer to swimmer, an important life skill. Whether it's our freshman health course, tennis, swimming, yoga, or the next department challenge, Roberta presents professionally and after all of these years continues to enjoy your work. Thank you, Roberta. Roberta Scoff. Allison Tony. Allison has spent her career teaching and coaching in Brookline, with an early 3-year blip teaching in that other school system, Newton. She has experienced the change in philosophy of physical education from an emphasis on team sports to the new PE, with a focus on teaching skills that lead to lifetime wellness. She works hard to give her students positive learning experiences and collaborates well with our community police aware officers and her colleagues. Allison is instrumental in the development of the freshman integrated health and fitness curriculum. She currently teaches the freshman course on lifetime activities for upperclassmen and also travels to Winthrop House, where she offers content and instruction tailored to students' needs. She has become a valued part of the Winthrop House community. Allison has also embraced the Spark Actions work at BHS, helping to increase students' heart rates for the purpose of increasing brain performance. Allison helps our students with special needs engage in our pre-MCAS Tabatas, brief interval exercises to activate the brain for organization, focus, and memory recall. Allison strongly believes in the importance of developing relationships with her students. She goes the extra mile to be sure that they are physically and emotionally safe, often working with our aware officers, nurses, guidance counselors, and social workers. As a result, Allison creates bonds with her students that last beyond their high school years. Allison clearly loves her job and continues her work with professionalism and passion. Thank you, Allison. Allison Tony. I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for your tremendous years of service and these wonderful pieces that your principals or coordinators wrote about you that just tell us a piece, I think, of the amazing careers that you've had in this school district, and we hope continue to have for many, many years to come. Thank you so much.
We have the citation.
Oh, I'm still up?
Right.
But I'll do that from here.
And then there's a note for you down there.
He's not here, and yes, we can. Do it then. Yes.
Do it on 525. Next time, when people have the material.
I lost him now, Mr. Morse, so I'll just...
Right.
So we're thrilled to have Melissa Petit here this evening to talk with us about a citation from the Massachusetts Recreation and Park Association for one of our programs. Melissa.
Yes, hi, thank you. So my name's Melissa Petit, and I'm the Assistant Director of Recreation here in Brookline. You want me to close? Okay. Great. Thanks for that extra pressure, Helen. But why I'm here tonight, I'm actually in a different role. The Massachusetts Recreation and Park Association, currently I sit as the vice president on that association, and that's the professional organization for park and recreation across the state of Massachusetts as well as New England. And it's local, municipal, private, commercial, and it's an opportunity for professionals to get together throughout the year to talk about industry standards, how to achieve high-quality programming and services, whether it's parks, maintenance, services, activities, and programs. Each year we come together in March. This year was in Hyannis, and we recognize professionals and communities who are doing outstanding, unique, and trend-setting activities. So this year, I submitted the Sparks program, which is a collaborative program under the direction of Vicki Milstein for the services that took place over the last 2 summers. And it was recognized by our professionals in March and received a special citation that I wanted to bring to the attention of the school committee and the community at large to just recognize, one, the hard work that Vicki puts into all of the outreach for the Brookline school students within school, but specifically in the after-school and out-of-school time periods of time, which has led to a tremendous partnership between early education, the Brookline school system, and the recreation department. And I think that this citation speaks to this particular program, but at large it speaks to the unique partnership that the school department has with the recreation department. It's not like this in many communities. It's actually quite the opposite. And so other communities look to us very often to say, how do you do that? How does that happen? And it's here, it's just over time has become, this is our culture. And I know over many years, sometimes it's not always that way, and some things come easier than others. But this collaboration went beyond just the school department and the recreation. It included countless hours of and groups that worked on this. So we started the program and we needed a location. Brookline Housing provided us with 2 locations. We needed teachers. The Brookline Community Foundation provided funding to help support materials and staff, as well as the BEEP budget. We needed to have activities while we were there. The Brookline Library provided literacy support for arts projects and for librarians to come on site. We wanted to have some sort of music. The Brookline Music School came and they played music every evening and showed a different instrument. Then, as we spoke about all the different projects that we had going on, we thought, how can we get some families to come to this? All these children are getting off of a school bus from a summer camp. How can we get them to come here? So we said, well, they would need a snack for them to sit through this and actually, absorb any of the information we're trying to get them to understand and learn. So the Brookline Food Pantry stepped up and provided all of the food. And we thought, okay, well, now we have the food. How are we going to put it together and get it there? The residents of the Brookline Goddard House had volunteers that put together 80 meals every week that went to the Housing Authority to these 2 locations. So it goes on, and I may be forgetting Brookline Access TV, who helped with publicity. Steps to Success provided interns that helped with the teachers. It just goes on and on. So I think that this recognizes the school system's commitment to out-of-school time and after-school activities. It recognizes Vicki and Min-Jen for all of their hard work, but I think it also recognizes the trust that the entire community has when we say we're going to do something, that it happens, and they know it's high quality. So on behalf of the Massachusetts Recreation and Park Association, I'd like to present this to Vicki and Min-Jen, as well as the entire school district, for a job well done for the community at large. Thank you very much.
Of course, please do. I have to say that one of the things that was so lovely for me about working in Brookline was meeting people like Melissa. We had an instant bond. We thought we would forge all kinds of new partnerships, and we did. And Melissa said, sometimes it feels awkward when you yell across the town green, "I love you," as it was awkward, but okay. And to all of you who sit here today who have always said, and Dr. Lupini, who reiterated it any number of times, do the right thing and do the right thing for children. And that has been a shared process and a real act of joy, and it has always been a pleasure to work on behalf of this community. So thank you, and thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say a word. Maybe some other people would like to too, but I think that the collaboration that Melissa described with all of the different groups in Brookline is unique to Brookline and says a lot about the town's willingness to collaborate amongst all its institutions. And I know, Melissa, you and Vicki and a lot of other people help encourage that, but I'm glad to hear, I think we're all glad to hear that that really happens. Thank you. Okay, well, that was exciting. Now we have to go to subcommittee reports, ladies and gentlemen. And Ms. Kershaw, you're up first with finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you implying this isn't going to be exciting?
It's always exciting when you report, Ms. Kershaw.
I'll tell you one very exciting thing. The Finance Committee held its final meeting of the year this week on Monday. Monday, June 3rd, the Finance Committee met and did, in fact, hold its final committee meeting of the year, unless the administration has need of our services, in which case we will be called back into service. At that meeting, we discussed, obviously, FY13, and thanks to the diligent work of the administration and the hard work of our staff, we are projecting on budget. I'm happy to report still, and we will have at our next full school committee meeting some accounting transfers, budget transfers that were included in the third quarter expenditure report for 13 that we'll be asking you to take action on, but it's really just accounting, catching up with programmatic and operational changes that we've already made, particularly in special education, ancillary services, and out-of-district placements. We also talked about the FY14 budget, which is still pretty much a work in progress. As most of you know, we've been through the state budget, through the House side, and the Senate side have been finalized, and the conference committee is meeting probably right as we speak to finalize. Even in a best case scenario, it does look like we'll be $200,000 to $300,000 short in local aid, but the town has reiterated its commitment to keep us, the schools, whole in that, and for that, we're grateful for their generosity. And so at present, the budget that the committee took action on, addendum 1.1, is still holding. We are, as we always do, carefully looking at kindergarten enrollments. Our current budget is based on 29 kindergarten classrooms. At this point, I think we are looking that there might be a 30th.
We've identified a 30th.
We've identified a 30th kindergarten. Hopefully, it will stay at that, and we will, of course, discuss any budget implications for 2014 as the numbers further evolve and we're able to confirm. And if there's additional conversation that needs to happen, we do have the workshop meetings coming up over the summer where we'll have an opportunity to have any budget updates if there needs to be. We also spent some time at the Finance Committee previewing, and perhaps Mr. Chairman or Ms. Stone, you'll be talking about this a little bit, really looking at sort of the financial forecasting associated with the work of our B-Space Committee and the general population growth and the challenges that we're facing in the long term. I think the school committee's been very serious about taking a long-term picture of not only where we are now and what challenges we're facing in terms of enrollment pressures next year, but really into the future, and thinking about whether there's additional revenue that are needed. So the Finance Committee spent some time really understanding where we are on those current projections and what the potential content could be of an override proposal. Right now, we looked at projections that include sort of three buckets. One would be the enrollment and costs associated with the enrollment that we're projecting now, both in the elementary and then when the current larger classes get to the high school. The structural deficit caused by lack of revenue keeping up with our expenses and our enrollment growth, and also any new school or capital expenditures that might be needed. I did want to note that the committee spent a good deal of time talking about the fact that the future picture in those three buckets doesn't really include future innovations as much as we might understand as the Strategic Plan Committee completes its work. There is some room for program improvements, and we were very happy to see that in there. And also, obviously, can't yet account for future efficiencies, which we also know will be part of our future package. So I'm sure we'll be having extended conversations about those too, but I was grateful that the Finance Committee had a chance to wrap up the year kind of thinking really about the longer term picture of what is it that we want and what are the needs going to be in terms of the schools. I want to thank the subcommittee members and the administration for a tough year, but we did a lot of good, hard work this year, and we'll look forward to continuing next year. If committee members want to add anything? Mr. Morse. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kershaw. And I think we ought to add a thank you to you because you coordinated very well this year what was a lively set of issues, and we appreciate that very much. Ms. Chalupsky, capital improvements.
You'll be happy to hear it's a very short report. And before we go to devotion, I'm not sure, Ms. Stone, if there's anything to report about Pierce? No. And about the modulars?
The modular committee is continuing to meet, looking at various kinds of things. At the last meeting, we actually went out and walked around in the parking area where the modulars will be built, but it's very much an ongoing project that will continue all summer.
If I could add one thing to that, off of our last building committee meeting at Lawrence, the architect has now put online in anticipation of the June 17th meeting a new set of drawings that the committee I think just got the email today, I believe. It is indeed very responsive to what was being talked about at that meeting, about concerns, particularly about the abutters on Newell Road, about the possibilities of a turnaround for cars and for trucks. It's a very tight space. We did a lot of, as Barbara said, we did a lot of walking the actual space and talking to neighbors in particular about that. I've just looked very, very quickly at the drawings, but it does look like they've been responsive to the things that were raised at that meeting. So we'll have a good meeting on the 17th, I hope.
I'm very glad to hear there's been some neighbor input,
A lot.
a lot of neighborhood. Well, we would expect that. Yes, Ms. Kershaw?
Thank you, Ms. Charlepsky. I did want to just pass along one question that did come up in the hallowed hallways of Lawrence School relative to the placement of the modulars and having them fit in aesthetically with the community, and whether or not we were anticipating that the current budget was going to allow for the kind of finish and landscaping that would please the eye of the neighbors and fit into the current aesthetic at Lawrence.
I think the quick answer to that is yes. Mr. Rowe has consistently said that the building budget for the modulars was considerably below the total budget that we've anticipated, and that total budget takes into account the likelihood that we'll want to do a finish, what we call fenestration, which is just how many windows and where they're placed, but also what the final finish is to match it with the existing school.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Morse?
Ms. Chalupsky, or maybe Ms. Stone, can you tell me, is it possible to do a turnaround?
The drawings that the architect has put forward suggest that it is possible. It is not necessarily true that it is desirable. There are different opinions on that
Right,
in
I'm
the
sure.
neighborhood.
Right.
I suspect we will hear those different opinions on the building committee as well. The turnaround would take up a lot of the space that would otherwise go to things like green shielding and it's not called shielding, but anyway, you understand what I'm talking about, the trees and the bushes.
Landscaping.
Thank you, landscaping. So that conversation is ongoing, but it's good at least to have real plans in front of us so we can look at what a turnaround would take and what it would mean in terms of trade-offs with other things that the committee would like.
Thank you.
If I may, excuse me, if I may add one more piece, the issue is the turnaround as far as trucks are concerned, delivery trucks. That's where some of the deliveries take place. Even if we move more to the front, the dumpster pickup is still there. And the architect had come up with a very nice-looking plan for the last modular meeting, but no truck could really turn around. So it more than cars, people tend to think we need a turnaround for cars, but the real issue is getting the trucks in and out and making them not block everything.
The new drawings do include both car and truck examples, and show how each size vehicle would use the turnaround. It's different for the two, but it's possible.
Well, thank you to the two of you for being on top of this and involved. I appreciate that. And June 17th is your school building committee or your modular committee meeting? Yes. Okay. Three of us attended the devotion school building, and I'm going to ask Abby to report on that.
So the Devotion School Renovation Committee met on May 30th. Two firms responded to our request for services for the Devotion project, HMFH and Flansburgh Associates, which are both firms that have worked with the town and the schools before. We selected 3 representatives to be part of the designer selection panel with the MSBA, Helen Charlepsky, Betsy DeWitt, and Ken Kaplan. Betsy from the Board of Selectmen and Ken Kaplan as the representative of the building committee. The designer selection panel, we believe, is slated to meet on Tuesday, June 25th, and we have scheduled interviews for the 2 firms on July 9th. The Devotion School Building Committee will meet again, we hope, on July 11th, when we hope to tour either the new Runkle, or sorry, not the new Runkle, the Runkle, the renovated Runkle, or the new Lincoln as examples of some recent school projects that the committee can keep in mind as we go into planning for devotion.
I don't know if, David, do you have anything to add to that?
No, thanks.
There was a great deal of discussion about the program for devotion, and other than that, I think that was about it. The next, so you already gave all the meetings. The next meeting of the Capital Subcommittee is June 26th at 8 in the morning, and that's yes?
I just had one thing on, my understanding, and I wish Mr. Rowe's not able to be with us this evening. There is still some outside chance, I understand from Tony Quigley, that the June 25th date may actually end up being the interview date. That's in the works. It's still possible. It would be a great thing, and that it would allow us to pick up 3 weeks that otherwise we're not going to have available to us. So that's still in the air.
Oh, that's
So-
excellent. If that were to happen, but as everybody knows, this schedule is sort of backed up a bit and tight. And we certainly want to have a building on site for September. Help me, Dr. Lupini.
16 or 17?
16.
16 we'd like to
16,
have,
we'd
but,
like to.
but yeah, this timeline's slipping. So I'm sure Mr. Quigley will be in touch.
Okay, terrific. That's my report, unless somebody has something more to add or ask.
Ms. Cox, can I ask, was it a surprise that there were only 2 interested parties, or is that normal?
There was some discussion about that. One of the ideas was that there's a lot of school construction going on right now, and so that it's possible that there are many projects in the works, and that our architecture firms may be already occupied in other places. But there was also some curiosity about whether HMFH's work on the concept study made them
Leg up.
a favorite, and therefore some other firms may have shied away from applying.
Right.
Actually, if I could add to that, Mr. Quigley had contacted at least one of the other firms who had initially taken out some information and come to the walk-around. And the feedback that he'd gotten was mostly that they'd done a good job on it, and so they weren't sure how much more they could add to it. And so that was part of the reason. I think also the feeling that, here they'd done a lot of work, and so it's a double-edged sword, let's say. I think it was important for us to do it. It was important for us to have that information in order to go forward. On the other hand, it may make other firms, well, it did make other firms reticent to apply. So the good news is they're both very good firms who both have a great deal of experience with schools, and So as somebody said at the meeting, and I can't remember who it was, said we wouldn't go wrong with either firm.
That's right.
Great, thank you very much. We're to curriculum. Ms. Scotto.
Two items tonight. The first one is the first reading of the K-8 Performing Arts Revised Learning Expectations, which we had in our packet for the meeting, the last meeting before this, and I reported out about our presentation at the Curriculum Committee. Just to remind you, these are K-8 learning expectations, and there are 5 different categories: performing, reading and notating, listening, creating, connecting, and I think those of us at the Curriculum Committee felt that they were quite impressive and have already in many ways, I think, been implemented and are resulting in excellent programs in our Performing Arts Department. So if there are any questions, other comments on?
I think I passed over for people to look at a submission which came in, which arrived when I was here from third grade. Where is it? David Pollock has it from third grade. I think it's Heath, and it's a group of music that has been created by third graders, which is, I think, quite extraordinary. They've actually written some music.
Oh, yes, well, I'll just hold it up, not having looked at it, but here's what you're talking about, and here are their pages with their notes here. Now, that's quite impressive for third grade. I'm not sure I could do that myself today, well past third grade. So we will continue to pass that around, but it is an impressive curriculum, yes.
Ms. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I missed this discussion at the subcommittee, and I'm just curious, the learning expectations are clearly oriented towards our programming in performing arts. I'm not concerned. I'm curious whether the subcommittee talked also about the integration of some of these expectations into other curricular areas, particularly what can be done in the regular classroom with incorporating music and culture. There's a lot, I think the learning expectations are terrific. There's a lot in here about different cultures and different styles of music and engaging with music in different ways, and I wonder whether that's all relegated to the performing arts courses, classes themselves, or whether there's some discussion about the integration with other courses.
Well, as I remember it, there was some discussion about working with teachers in various areas of the curriculum around some of these things. And I think that's the kind of thing that when we have more collaborative time, that could be a part of it. And I think that my impression was that the music department is quite willing to do this and sees it as part of their mission. Yeah. Take over.
Thank you for the question, because it actually speaks to the value of documented learning expectations. As you reveal them, you will see they're quite explicit, and teachers, K-5 teachers, as they teach across the curriculum, can look at those and say, oh, my social studies unit about, X fits here beautifully. And so there are a number of places where Jeff Tegnell and Christoph Brown, along with Janet McNeil, have identified those connections already. So it's exciting. It's very exciting. And I agree with you, Ms. Scotto, about the collaborative time. That's the intention, one of the intentions of that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Scotto?
It will come back for a second reading at our next meeting. I'd also like to tell you that the curriculum meeting met last Tuesday. I was unable to attend, so I'm going to ask Abby if she will report out.
Susan or Jennifer will jump in if I've forgotten anything. So the subject of our last curriculum meeting was the district's transition to the 2011 Massachusetts curriculum frameworks, which are based on the Common Core state standards. And for the last few years, Brookline's been working to ensure that our curricula are aligned with the Common Core. We met with the English Language Arts and Math curriculum coordinators and department chairs. We learned that key shifts in the area of English Language Arts are an increased emphasis on nonfiction, reading and writing, which extends into science and social studies instruction, and a greater range of genres and forms in reading and writing. Patricia Kinsella, who's the K-8 English Language Arts Coordinator for the K-8s, and Mary Burchinall, the English Department Chair at Brookline High School, assured us that the literacy initiative in the K-8s and the content reading initiative at the high school have helped to smooth the transition to the new frameworks. Students are receiving greater exposure to and experience in reading and writing in the content areas of science and social studies. Also, the benchmark assessment system and the level literacy interventions are ensuring that students are making progress in advancing their degree of text difficulty in their reading. And Patricia Kinsella is assembling an in-house addendum to make the differences between the Common Core standards and the benchmark assessment system continuum clear for teachers and easy to reference and bridge. Key shifts in the math frameworks are an increased focus with fewer topics explored in greater depth, and the introduction of standards of mathematical practice, which are, I think were referred to, had already been incorporated in the high school in terms of habits of mind. There are things such as reasoning abstractly and quantitatively, modeling with mathematics, etc. There are 8 of them in total. Karen Wolfson, the K-8 math coordinator, told us that Brookline was fortunate in having adopted Think Math and Impact Mathematics in that they align nicely with the new Common Core, and therefore we can continue to use familiar materials with students, things that they've used in the past and feel comfortable with. She and Josh Paris, who is the BHS Math Department Chair, are conducting trainings to help teachers create activities that will help develop student skills in mathematical practices and the standards of mathematical practice. The work for the coming year will focus on the 7th through 9th grades with a particular attention on the 9th grade geometry course. That geometry course will become more integrated, incorporating more algebra than it currently does, and statistics are much more widely spread throughout the math curriculum. There's a greater emphasis on that as a topic in the Common Core. 7th, 8th, and 9th grade teachers have been working together to ensure a smooth transition with the goal of full implementation of the math curriculum frameworks through grade 10 in the 2014-15 school year and full implementation through grade 12 in the following year. As part of our discussion, we reviewed the opportunities for differentiation, particularly in math, in the early grades with the new frameworks. The hope is that the greater focus on fewer topics will allow opportunities for those who need more repetition and practice in a concept to have it, and those who grasp the concept quickly to dive deeper into the topic with extensions. And that seems to be a discussion that we will continue with. And I don't know, Susan, if you wanted to add anything.
Bravo, Ms. Cox. I might just ask for the public, I'm just not sure that everybody knows what the Common Core is. Maybe I'm wrong about that. In 2 sentences, could you explain for the public what the Common Core is?
So we know that through the No Child Left Behind laws, federal statutes, that every state developed its own frameworks and assessment systems. And there's been a movement because of the wide variation in those state frameworks and standards to find something that was more uniform and consistent. So how many states have signed on? 45 states have signed on to the development of a set of Common Core standards that would bring some consistency across from one state to another. Is that helpful?
Yes, very.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Chalupsky?
This may be a longer question and so may not be for tonight, but I'm curious, sort of overall, and I'm probably looking looking at you, Jennifer. The Common Core and what we're already teaching, what is the gap between, or if any? Or are we beyond them?
We certainly are not beyond them. They are very rigorous, but the good news is that through our process of program review with each and every curricula area, the committee is charged to revise the learning expectations to meet or exceed the current state standards. And Massachusetts played a very strong role in the creation of the Common Core. So the adjustments that Brookline is making and had to make are quite reduced from that of other communities in Massachusetts.
Great, thank you.
I would just
Ms.
say
Ditkoff?
I would just say that, just to add to that, that they are much reduced from what communities around the country are facing, and in fact, it's creating a bit of a backlash, unfortunately, in some communities that have a great distance, they're looking at a great distance in a short period of time, and are potentially backing off the commitments. That sort of, the joke is sort of 45 states and declining every day, as people really think about what it means to try to have a rigorous curriculum like the Common Core. And there are various political arguments that are getting made about why they're dropping out, but that's sort of the underlying reason. Is that fair?
Interesting.
Thank you. If that does it for curriculum, we can move to government relations. And Ms. Stone, I don't know whether you have anything to say. I know that Dr. Lupini would like to make some comments.
I was just going to say that Ms. Kershaw pretty much covered what government relations has been caring about, which is what's going on Beacon Hill with the budget, so I will kick that over to Dr. Lupini.
Thanks. So the MASS Superintendent's Association officers are in an ongoing conversation with the commissioner regarding the Department of Education, both statewide and federal agenda, and the pace of that agenda, and the concerns being raised statewide about the pace of that agenda. We focused today at a meeting with him, with Dr. Mitchell Chester, on 3 or 4 main, it's easy to say 3 main areas, and I can subdivide it into 10, and that's part of the problem, right? So we focused on educator evaluation, we focused on retail, and we focused on Common Core and Park, which is the assessments that are coming, possibly, if Massachusetts ever adopts the system. And the problem with that, part of the problem with that is that subdivides into many things. Within educator evaluation, you can have a fairly lengthy and somewhat not terribly interesting conversation about district-determined measures, DDMs, and other pieces within that. And district-determined measures, which are the part of the evaluation system that have to do with our local assessments and how they factor in a teacher evaluation. And the general message communicated to the commissioner today, which he hears all the time, is it's too much too fast. And if we're all interested in this agenda, and I want to say here, I emphasized over and over with him, and so did the other officers, that this is not about questioning the agenda. This is about making sure the agenda can be put into place. And at the pace it's going now, it is a train going out of control. And we don't want that to happen, and yet the way that the department is driving this change makes it a certainty that it will, in my view. And so one part of our charge, one part of the officer's charge to the rest of the executive committee today was to offer, the commissioner uses the word granular, so granular recommendations that they could implement and that would make a difference today. And there were some recommendations around district-determined measures and the reporting mechanism of educator evaluation. The group that I was working on with Park, and I know you know something about Park, so we're in this 35 state, is that right? Is it 35 state? Yeah. 22? Thank you. State consortium designing assessments around the Common Core. And the department continues to talk about those assessments being implemented in 14-15, but the fact of the matter is that this State Board of Education has yet to adopt Park. which is fascinating. And there's no plans in the near future to adopt. So we offered a very specific recommendation, which is from whatever date the department adopts Park, we have a 2-test administration window until we actually do it. And there are technical issues around that, and there are adaptive issues around that. The technical issues are that this is largely technology-based, and most districts aren't ready, aren't set up, and will require those years to get themselves to that point. The adaptive changes are pretty simple. I mean, they have to do somewhat with the technological impact of that, and it's a different test. It's testing different things because it's administered using technology, and there's a lot of work to be done. One thing we just learned in April that I strongly object to is that that one of the guidelines created within Park is that all the tests are timed, and I have to say, as a parent of a child with special needs, I'm offended by that. Right? Massachusetts got it right when they went to no timing on any of the tests up front so that kids with special needs were not separated out by their need to have additional time. And Park has it wrong right now. And so there's a need to work some of those things out, and we're not there yet. We're going to need some time after. So that was one example. He asked for very specific recommendations. We gave them to him. And we'll see how he acts with them. But I will say here that one of the things that we tried to make sure he understood today is that we're trying to be cooperative, and there's a good percentage of our particular membership and memberships of other organizations that don't want to be cooperative. They want to say no, stop now. That's not who we are. That's not where we are on this. But we're concerned that this is moving, that this total agenda is moving much, much too fast. And as a number of us said to him today, quite frankly, we're a little sick of shifting priorities within the agendas that make us look to our teachers and administrators like we don't know what we're talking about. So we'll start down a road with retail one day, we'll get a shift in terms of what the directions are the next day, and you begin to feel like people are legitimately thinking, I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't feel like I know what I'm talking about anymore, because that we're building planes, big planes, while we're in the air, and it's very scary. It's very scary at this level, and I'm certain it's terrifying at the classroom level. And people want to do a good job with this. All of our people want to do a good job with all of these initiatives. And again, nobody I've encountered believes that there's anything wrong with the core belief system that drives these agendas, and that's the problem. Is that we're taking good things and we're damaging them along the way. So to that end, you will see an upcoming fairly large presence from MASS at a committee hearing on the 27th, when the Education Committee will hear a series of bills all structured around this issue of doing an audit of department initiatives and having them report back to the legislature. Some call for delays. Some call for no more initiatives until we get the audit. It's an array of bills that all have sort of the same purpose but go at it in differing ways. And our association, I don't think, is the only one that's planning to make sure that our presence is felt at those hearings on the 27th, and that we send a message.
The committee may or may not remember that those bills, or some of the ones that Dr. Lupini just mentioned, were part of the MASC resolutions that we supported and actually had some hand in massaging some of the language around both unfunded mandates, but also the idea of an audit and what would move us most quickly to getting our arms around this runaway initiative season. So we have weighed in as a committee on these issues, but certainly presence at those hearings is encouraged for anybody who can put that into their schedule.
Ms. Chalupsky?
Will MASC also be?
I can't speak to that. I don't know. This has been, our conversation with the commissioner has been moving pretty quickly. My sense is, given that I think at least one of the bills they sponsored, that they will have some sort of a presence there. But I know that there's sort of an organized effort on the part of MASS to have a lot of representation there and a lot of testimony there, in that we don't necessarily feel we're being heard right now, as we've voiced concerns about the implementation overload.
Ms. Ditkoff?
Just out of curiosity, I mean, it's a hard needle to thread to say we're sort of supportive of the agenda, supportive of the underlying philosophy of these things. We think they will improve
Yep.
teaching and learning, and we can't implement them all at once realistically, and if you try to, it will fail. So I guess I'm curious how that will be said so that it will be heard, not as a criticism of the underlying philosophy, but of a prioritization or a sequencing, or I'm just curious how to, it's hard
I think
to
it gets
do.
said, yes, it is, and I think it gets said, and that's why we kept coming back today and saying we support the initiatives, and because we want them to succeed,
Right.
we offer this set of recommendations, right? And so I think you'll hear a lot of that over the coming weeks. I think you'll hear a lot of that day. I offered one example of the subcommittee I was on and the recommendation we offered. I'll tell you on a bigger, grander, so when we got out of the sort of individual initiative mode of today, one of the things that's troubled me the most that I've talked with the commissioner now twice about is that they admit not having a process map. That is sort of a management grid of all this. So they have people who are working in retail and people who are working in educator evaluation and people who are working with DDMs within that, and people who are working in parent and student and staff surveys, and people who are working in park, and so when you talk to those people individually, one of the reactions I've had or seen is that they act surprised when you talk about wanting to, questions about why this, why are we doing that, and it's because there's no overall process map of all of this. And when you begin to put it together, which some members of our officer team did over the weekend, you are just blown away by what districts and schools and teachers within those schools are being asked to do. You're blown away. So we keep coming back to we're supportive and we're trying to give you real concrete, granular suggestions so that this can succeed. That's our goal. Because I've said to you a number of times, I actually support the sort of the core piece of retail. I think it's critical. It's critical to our district. It's critical to many other districts that classroom teachers have the skills to work with students for whom English is not their primary language. Now let's build a system that actually makes sure that happens over the right amount of time, right? That makes sure that can occur. In fact, Maureen LaCroix, who's now working with that effort out of the department, often quotes me that I actually believe it should be every teacher, not just the core teachers. And I do. I don't believe that a phys ed teacher should be separated out from that. Right? And yet the department says core. So, I very much believe in that initiative, and what I'm seeing is some implementation that guarantees that it's not going to succeed. And that deeply troubles me. So I think we just keep sending that message that everything that we offer, that I think if you saw the list of 7 or 8 recommendations that we even offered today, you'd say, wow, those are not coming from people who are opposed.
But Dr. Lupini, you have had some feedback that suggests that the people who are raising these issues are opposed. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
You have had some feedback in the conversations that basically suggest that maybe you are opposed to the reforms, not you personally, but your group, rather than being supportive, which I think may be what Ms. Ditkoff was referring to in terms of how you get the message out.
Yeah, you need to be very careful with the message. The officers in at least one conversation last week were painted as people opposed to reform, which I have to say I found personally insulting. So we've worked really hard at messaging on this, and we'll continue to work hard, even if that means making sure that we have the right kind of PR consultants and all to make sure the message gets out in the right way.
Right. Ms. Chalupsky?
Well, I'm wondering if it would be helpful, appropriate, whatever, for the government relations to write up a letter on the part of The school committee sort of. I noticed, I didn't want you to get too
Can you
comfortable
pass that down
there.
here?
Would it be helpful for us to write something to submit?
Well, let me say this, it would, because I don't know, just off the top of my head, I think it would be helpful to figure out where MASC is on this issue and on the hearing on the 27th. I'm happy to talk with members of the Government Relations Subcommittee about the proposals that MASS has spoken with the Commissioner about, to see whether there's some support for those or others, and to work with you in whatever way you'd like to be part of these conversations.
The thing is, there's a time.
Yes, there is.
here, because today is the, whatever date.
Today's the 6th, and this is the
6th.
27th.
So we have one more meeting in between?
We do.
25th.
We do.
Okay.
We do. Ms. Charlevsky, I'm absolutely certain I just heard you volunteer to draft something.
No, I'm not taking the punt. Anyways, it was a thought.
But I think it's a good thought.
I'm not in charge of government relations.
Sorry.
We'll discuss it further, right?
I will be leaving the country.
Yes, I know. I'm well aware of that, yes. No, this was not a sudden decision on her part, right. Okay, I guess that does it for government relations, negotiations. Ms. Stone?
We have continued to have very productive meetings with ASME around the food services contract. Unfortunately, we had to reschedule the next meeting that was planned, so we're trying to find a date in late June or early July to continue those negotiations.
Very good. And now policy review.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. You have all in front of you exactly the same thing you had in front of you last time for a first reading. We had a good conversation about it. This is the proposed revisions to all sections of the student admission and residency policy except the portion that deals with dwellings intersected by the town line, which we continue to work on separately and will bring to you separately. But as there were no concerns raised last time with the revisions to the other portions of the policy, I would move that the committee pass this as revisions tonight.
So you'd like a motion?
I have so moved.
You have so moved. And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Ms. Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Stone, I'm sorry, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I just have two quick questions. The first is relative to the termination when we determine that a student is no longer residing in Brookline and have cause. Is there a time period by which they're allowed to stay? That the termination, there's a notice and then termination, I just couldn't find it. It's
The
probably
only
in here.
exceptions are later in the policy, and there is some flexibility given to the superintendent to make a judgment that a student should be able to stay. But the policy is specific to the immediate.
Effective immediately.
Effective immediately, right.
Okay.
I mean, beyond policy, we generally try to find the right transition.
Like a
Point. If
vacation
it's close to the end of the
time
quarter,
or-
if it's a vacation, we look for those kinds of times.
Right.
If they're reasonably close.
But you didn't feel that it was necessary to specify that because it's an operating standard that we have.
Right. And the other thing
Or-
that the policy
or-
says is that we do have the right to seek payment from a family that has, that
If we
has
keep
moved
them.
out where the child has continued to attend. So in the period between our discovery of the change and from when they actually moved out. So there are various things. Again, the practice always puts the best interest of the child first, but on the other hand, it is very important that that everyone understand, that the public that comes to Brookline understands that it is simply not legal for them to continue to attend the public schools if they move out of Brookline, with the exception of the exceptions that are specified there. So it is effective immediately. Again, as Dr. Lapini said, in practice, we work very hard so that children are not unduly penalized.
Because it seems like you could almost tie it to ensuring that, picking up on the best interest of the child, ensuring that the child's enrolled in another school, has the opportunity to enroll in another school, might be another operational standard.
Certainly, that was never raised as an option for putting in the policy, and it's not something that Brookline would be able to ensure. We don't know all of the other systems. We don't know where these folks move to. So I would be very reluctant to burden our administration with with essentially what is a parental right and duty for their children, which is ensuring their continued education. But again, in practice, it's hard for me to believe that our administration wouldn't ask that question, but I would not want to burden them in policy with the obligation to do so.
The second question, at the risk of compromising my carefully constructed lack of conflict of interest this year, I wondered if any of the conversations, and this is a federal law but not state law that applies to child welfare agencies, about children who are placed out of district temporarily, not as part of a homeless or deemed McKinney-Vento homeless, but placed in a foster home. Outside of the district, and I just wondered if any of the conversations about the exceptions covered that.
There is something in the policy, and I'm sorry, I'm not remembering exactly what the language is, about temporary children who are temporarily living elsewhere or right. Students who move from Brookline temporarily because of the severe or chronic illness of the student or immediate family member, the death, right? So this, I believe, would also apply to the circumstance that you just described. Again, these are under the waivers and the superintendent's flexibility in allowing continued attendance. Thank you.
I'll just confirm, because I was there at the discussion, that the importance of giving the administration the flexibility to arrive and allow at whatever conclusion they deem to be in the best interest of the child within reason. If there's no other discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye, or raise your hand. That's good. And all those opposed? I think the ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much.
Policy Review Subcommittee will be meeting again next week on June 12th. We will continue, I hope, to look at the issue of the dwellings intersected by the town line, and also, if everybody could bring their calendars, we will be setting up an agenda and a calendar for the coming school year for the Policy Review.
Great, and we'd like to follow that policy with all of the other chairmen of all the other subcommittees. Thank you for setting that precedent. Are there any other, yes, Mr. Pollack?
We might just want to clarify that the vote still accepted V3, that we.
Yes, it did. The motion was specific.
Very good. Okay, are there other liaisons that people would like to discuss? Ms. Chalupsky.
I have one announcement. Actually, I'm sorry that Vicki didn't give it, but there's the second annual Be Bear Book Club premiere happening on Wednesday, June 12th. I'll pass this around from 4 to 6 p.m. at BAT TV. The new person who's in charge of the programming at BAT that's working with Beep Connections, our early childhood, has been fantastic in their collaboration. There's going to be a DVD made out of this. There's authors who are going to be reading their books. It's for kids, and it should be a really fun afternoon, and everybody's invited, and I'm passing this around. And just to sort of maybe emphasize once more, the collaboration that's been happening at the Beep Connections between all the town agencies, and we're actually, I include myself because I'm part of that group, are including now for next year, the Department of Public Health, and talking about having the food pantry maybe even come occasionally, so that it's amazing when you have a group of people who have goodwill and want to do the right thing for kids, what happens. The Sparks program is what you saw, this Bee Bear Book Club. It's just really, we should all be proud.
Great.
And I hope the tab will maybe write an article about it. It's preschool, mostly. Preschool, kindergarten probably would be fine, too.
So maybe if there are no other reports, I'll just mention briefly a few things about the B-Space meeting. Some of you have been to them, but some of you have not. We had a very interesting meeting where a Brookline resident, Cynthia Tsao, who's a professional facilitator for groups involved in complex decision-making, came to enable us to try and, in an organized fashion, begin to identify the important factors that we would consider for any alternative, and also how we would measure the positives or not so positives of each factor. And we spent a lot of time on that, and people seemed to be very receptive, and we actually went through a test with one alternative to get a sense as to how it would feel, and we may have an opportunity to pursue that kind of decision-making process. We also heard several subcommittees make a report, particularly the one studying the financial implications of both K through 8 and high school necessary expansion plans, having to do with really capital expenditures, and also from a operating budget point of view, the implications for the continuing growth of the student population and the inevitable ongoing operating budget implications for that. It was the first time that really we had put numbers together. Both Sean and Peter did a wonderful job. The information is up on the website. It was an impressive report in many respects, in that it suggested very strongly that we certainly were going to have to do an operating override and probably a debt exclusion as well. The numbers are not only impressive, but there were some indications that the numbers were not completed yet, and there might be some additions to the numbers. In addition, we had a report about some of the alternative locations if we chose to do a new building, and particularly the redistricting implications for some of those locations, including some interesting maps, which from a technology point of view were particularly impressive, and we had seen in some prior activities that had taken place regarding the study that we made earlier. The part of that will morph into the override activity through an override study committee, and we will, Rebecca and I will speak to that briefly with regard to what the selectmen have already begun to do. I'll leave it at that.
Can I just, one?
Yes, please.
So let me just add to one piece that you said.
Fine.
So with respect, and we know we talked about this at finance as well, but with respect to this sort of basic model budget that Mr. Rowe and Mr. Cronin have put together, it does leave out a number of components. It is a basic starting point. It does, we know, for example, not address the shortfall we have at present between the staffing where we should be and where we are. And we've thrown out some sort of back-of-the-envelope estimates on that, but we're in the middle of sort of doing the work around that. It doesn't include some of those positions in terms of support positions, guidance, et cetera, going forward. It doesn't include anything around technology, whether we decide that technology belongs as part of this override effort or whether it belongs in the capital budget. It at least needs to be accounted for here somewhere. And there are a number of different elements. And you're correct that even at the number that's there, which is missing these 3 or 4 major components, it is significant.
Yes, Ms. Titkoff.
Just to pick up on that, and one of the comments that I made there, and I'll repeat here, is the danger of lowballing estimates. Especially when the number's high already, there's a tendency to say, oh, this number's pretty high, let's shave it down, let's manage it down. And I think there's a danger in setting unfortunately, an artificially low number in the public's mind that actually is not reflective of reality, and then when it comes in significantly higher, people will wonder why, when in fact, it was higher all along, we just hadn't set it. And so I do think that there's something not only just dangerous, I guess is the word I'll say, about lowballing what we think is needed. And just being really clear and transparent about what's in the numbers, and if things aren't in the numbers, then maybe giving ranges or estimates, so that when a number like 6.8 million goes out, when it's at least 8 and potentially 10, that we are clear about that, and it doesn't just stay at 6.8, because people do fixate on numbers. So anyway, it was a first look, and I would just say that as we do this going forward, it'll just be really important to, even where we don't have numbers, to give ranges or ballparks on what we are talking about, so that people don't fixate on the wrong number.
Great. I certainly agree with that. I think others do as well. Okay. Public comment. Ms. Coyne, do we have people who would wish to make public comment? No people who wish to make public comment. This is a time when we have for people who want to make comments that are relevant for the school committee. Is there anybody here who did not sign up who would like to make a comment? Seeing none, I think we can move on to the next item, which is significant and exciting for all of us, and that is welcoming back to Brookline the high school students who have returned from China. We are very interested to hear from you all. And
Mr. Lantos.
Mr. Lantos, please.
Good to see all of you. Thanks for having us back. Our group returned on Saturday, June 1st, and I want to not take any further time and have them stand up first. Maddie O'Kelly Bangsberg, go ahead, stand up. Celia Comiskey, Lynn Tsao, Abigail Herscovici, Pablo Jerez, Peter Allen, Maya Chan, and Christina Cook. They spent the last 4+ months in Xi'an, China as our ambassadors, and I'm just so proud of this group. And their teacher, Brittany Stevens, who did an absolutely outstanding job. I'll call Brittany up. She's got a few words to say, and before I forget, we have a schedule that we've organized of presentations to 7 of the 8 grade schools, and the first one was this morning, where the group has organized a slideshow and a bit about their time in Xi'an, and we did it for the first presentation this morning at the Runkle School, and it was very well received. So we look forward to making presentations to the other grade schools. And this year we had more applicants to the China Exchange Program than I think we've ever had, almost 30. And in the interview process, and we heard from almost 30 applicants, that we asked them where they had first heard about the China Exchange Program, and it was in these presentations from the returning group. So Thank you, Superintendent Lupini, for allowing our principals to afford this opportunity for the students. So,
Thank you, Steve.
Brittany.
Thank you for having us. I will try to be brief because I know everyone's very busy, but I can assure you we have stories to tell for days, so if anyone's interested, find one of us and we'll tell you stories. The last time we gathered here was in February. It was to say goodbye in a way, in two ways. To say goodbye to our counterparts from the Gaussian School, the students and teacher who spent the fall with us, and to say goodbye to our community for 4 months. And I left that night feeling a touch anxious, because it felt real once I came here to say goodbye to you. And also, I felt understanding to the sentiment that the Gaussian students shared, because a few of them spoke, and they spoke about what it meant to be members of the Brookline community, and how unique and rare this place really is. And after spending 4 months away, I can assure you that it is a unique and rare place to be. My friends are teasing me that I say work is one of the things I missed about America, and they think I'm crazy. But when I was in China, in Xi'an, I had the chance to meet teachers and administrators from all over the country and speak to them about our exchange. And some of them had heard of our exchange, had used our exchange as a model to set up their own. Those who hadn't were envious when I told them about the support that we have from our school committee, from our community. And it really is the support of the community that makes this program what it is. It's due in part to all of your work, to the work of Steve Lantos, who doesn't get nearly enough time in China because he's here making sure that we all can enjoy our time in China. The work and generosity of the families that you see here who open their homes to the students, to Superintendent Lupini. I couldn't go to one dinner with anyone without them telling me, you have to say hi to Bill Lupini when you get home. I have a gift for you, actually, that I had to pack, so I'll leave that with you when I leave. Deborah Holman, our headmaster, stepped into a bunch of responsibilities at the high school, and in the midst of that managed to make one of our steering committee meetings and met me and immediately was supportive of the program. And again, I think in a unified sense, all of those things show that one of our values here is that we want our students to be true global citizens. And if I could speak longer tonight, I would tell you about the 8 students that you see and how incredibly proud I am. These kids challenged me every day, and I mean that in the best way, not in a bad way. They pushed for understanding and took risks culturally and socially and have grown so much because of it. And you should all be as proud as I am of them. And the experience the 9 of us had is largely in part to you, and I'm so appreciative. As a business person, I think bottom line very often, and I know there are hard decisions that go into supporting things in terms of the bottom line, and the ROI on this one is immense. I can't say enough about what we have gained and what we will continue to gain. Return on investment, guys, return on investment. So, thank you. I know, again, I'll be brief. Thank you for that. Thank all of you in this room, and good luck to Adam Wolf and the next group. I think that my students will tell you a bit briefly, and then maybe we'll introduce next year's group. Is that how this is going? Okay. I'm going to give you this, Bill, before I forget. And Abigail, why don't you come and speak?
Hello. You guys probably all remember us. We've been here quite a few times over the past year, and that's because it's been a really crazy year for all of us in this room. Just over a year ago, we came here because we were accepted to the program, just like them, and I was very excited because it's such a cool opportunity to have, but I didn't really know what I was getting into. And then we came here again in September with the 8 students and the teacher from the Gaussian High School. And you welcomed them very graciously, and thank you for that. I think they were all very glad to meet you. And then we came here again in January to bid farewell to our friends from Xi'an, from the Gaussian High School, and to also wish us, who have just returned, a good trip. So thank you so much for your continuous support to this exchange program. We really can't say thank you enough for giving us the opportunity. And it's really amazing to think of the number of lives that have sort of been touched by this program. I think the way I think of it is kind of like a web. So at the center of the web are the 16 students, the 8 of us from Brookline and the 8 from Xi'an, and the 2 teachers. And from those 16 students branch out to many, many people. Everyone they met, like their families, the families who have hosted, their students, the classmates they had in their classes at Brookline High School, their teachers, just even acquaintances who they may not really remember very well. All of those people have been touched by this program. And many of us, like I think all of us in this room, have been very deeply touched by the program, and it's probably changed our lives in ways I couldn't tell you right now, but I'm sure I'll find out. So, while this year has come to an end, sorry, one second. This year has come to an end, but I don't think the web has stopped growing. I think it will continue to grow because forever I'll carry the memories and the experience and the difference in perspective and so many things that this exchange program has brought to me. And that will cause the web to grow, maybe a little slower, but to still grow, and for the connections made to still develop. So thank you to all of you, to the school committee, to you, Dr. Lupini, and thank you to Ms. Holman at the high school for supporting the exchange right off the bat, and to all the other administrators and teachers at the high school who have supported the exchange. And thank you to Mr. Lantos. You work so hard for this program. It's kind of insane. But you should know that we all really appreciate all the things you do. Thank you to Ms. Stevens for coming with us to China. I couldn't really think of a better teacher to spend these months with, but I'm sure you'll be great too, Mr. Wolf. No, I'm sure you will be. I just don't really know you. Yes, thank you to everyone who has supported the program over the past 13 years. And I'm sure it sounds very corny and very cliche, but I think it's given us memories to last a lifetime.
Hello? Okay. So I'm Pablo. I'm obviously one of the 8 students that went to China this year. And first of all, I want to start by saying thank yous, of course. Thank you to you guys, the committee, because you guys supported enormously this program. Also, thank you to the Brookline High School for allowing this program to go on for so many years. More specifically, thanks to the administration, Ms. Holman, who, even though she's a new principal in our school, she has encouraged the program, really quickly. Also, even though they're not present, the Gaoxing School, thank you for accepting us in all the classes for 4 months. Steve Lantos, of course, thank you for organizing this. As Abigail said, it's pretty insane. And the counterpart, who is not here, but Kevin, who worked really hard, excursions every weekend, planning for us, as well as the administration in the Gaoxing School. And last but not least, thank to Ms. Stevens, because when we got to Xi'an, she was not, and after the experience, she was not only a teacher to us, but also a friend and a mother. So thank you for that. And I think that without her, it would have been really different. So I can't really explain like the whole experience because I have my thoughts, and it's really hard for you guys to understand, I think. But I'll tell you guys a few stories, and I hope you can get there somehow. So once I remember when we were in the Muslim market, and the Muslim market is actually located in the center of Xi'an. It's a very interesting place. And we were like in a group, and it's really interesting to see like how we like discover independently without our families We like go off ourselves and look for new alleyways. It's really amazing. And I think like one of the big themes of this trip was discovery. And I think like discovery is like really important also for you guys. It will be very, very important. I also remember immersion class. Immersion class were like a very big part of the program. It's very, most of the time we wouldn't know what the teacher was saying because we're not fluent in Chinese, but it's really interesting to see how you can talk to these students, even though they speak Chinese, you can try and communicate with them. And I think that by making this net that Abigail mentioned, it's really like it's helped not only me but all of us to become more globally aware, I guess, or more like a global citizen. And it's really making this connection between like intercultural, bonds. And I think that really affects me, and I'll explain later. Also, finally, one of the things that really struck me is that I'm completely immersed in this world that I have no idea sometimes what they're talking about and what they're saying about me. But it's really interesting to like immerse yourself in a language, and I think the China exchange really allowed me to expand my ideas on Chinese culture and really make me see like what I'm capable of. And so to like wrap things up, I really think this opportunity that will come for many, many groups in the future has really opened a lot of doors for me, not only culturally, but also very personally. The other day I actually auditioned for a play, which I would have never done. So I can really say that I don't know, my confidence has definitely gone up because of this experience. Now I'm very open to many possibilities, many opportunities. Just one more thing to say, I really want to encourage the next year's students to really like squeeze the 4 months, because they might be 4 months, but they'll go really, really quickly. And one day you'll be like in bed and you'll be like, oh God, it's my last night. So yeah, every time you can, just go out and discover. It's really important. Thank you very much.
Do we have time for one more student to? Can we? Okay.
We can do that.
Christina, come on up. Quick.
Hi, I'm Christina. I also went on the exchange. Okay. The past year has been full of adventures. 3 years ago, I would have never thought I'd be standing here today. I have 2 families, one in Brookline, one in Xi'an. I know without a doubt my family in Xi'an will support me for the rest of my life. A particular moment assured me of this. Early one morning in April, I woke up and checked the news online. I was shocked to see a headline with Boston and multiple gruesome pictures of marathon runners. I ran into my kitchen crying. My host mom was cooking breakfast, and it seemed a normal day to her. She saw me crying and immediately rushed to comfort me. I didn't have to explain myself. Even with the language barrier, she treated me like her own daughter. She hugged me and sat me down. With the limited Chinese I had, I tried explaining the events that occurred in the Boston Marathon. She brushed her fingers through my hair and prayed for my family and friends back in Boston. Looking back on that day, I will always remember Ma Li and the motherly feeling she gave me. I will have her as a mom for the rest of my life. I would like to thank her and my family for always supporting me through my journey in China. I know they will continue to be my family in the future. I would like to thank Steve Lantos and Ms. Stevens for helping me get to China and being the best mentors I could ever ask for. I would like to thank the Brookline High School administrators for helping the 8 of us before and after our travels in China. I would like to thank the school committee for keeping the program running. Lastly, I would like to thank all the families, but especially my family, for supporting our aspirations over the past wonderful year.
Happy birthday next week. I hope you'll have us back in September when we can welcome the arriving Gaoshan students who are scheduled to arrive sometime around September 4th or 5th. And I'd like to finally just introduce, and you'll meet them again in September, Mr. Adam Wolf, physics teacher at the high school, who will accompany next year's group. And if next year's group of students could just stand up, please. Excellent. Yeah, we're missing a few, but you'll meet them formally in September. And thank you all.
Comments by school committee members, please. Ms. Cotto.
Well, I have a great fondness for the Gaussian School. I've been there myself a couple of times. And as you spoke, I kept thinking about the first time I went to China, and I went with a primary source trip. It was such a revelation for me as a teacher, because I had been teaching about this culture and society for a long time, but I didn't really know it. And I felt as if I was no longer, when I came back, I was no longer teaching about an imaginary world, but I was teaching about a real place with real people. And I was lucky enough to go back several times, and at one point worked with the teachers at the Gaussian School. But that was nothing compared to what you have experienced. The young man who spoke said, I was immersed in a world where I have no idea what they are talking about or saying about me, and you were comfortable there. It wasn't the place that you had grown up, but you were able to be immersed in a culture that is totally, well, not totally, but in many ways very different from what you have here every day in Brookline High. And that kind of experience will give you a whole new view of the world, a whole new view of other people. It's very easy to look at other people as being different from us, not open or understandable to us. But this kind of experience where you have actually lived in the homes with Chinese people, been in situations where you have interacted with them, become friends with them, feel now as if they're your family. This will change you in ways you haven't even anticipated. And the only thing I can say is you have done something for yourselves that you'll think back years later and think, my goodness, how was I able to do that at the age that I was? And look how this has changed my life. Someone talked about the web. That web will always be there in certain ways. And you will be interacting maybe with people you've met, maybe with different people, but they will remind you of this experience. It has become part of you. And I am just so pleased that we in Brookline are able to provide a group of our students with this opportunity. So I think you can rest assured that the school committee, I think I can speak for everybody here, truly supports this this opportunity, and I hope we will do so for years to come, and I think we will.
Ms. Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of you were so gracious to thank us for all of our support, so I just wanted to say thank you. You're so brave for going and trying something new and bringing back your ideas and figuring out how to apply it to what you're going to be and do. And I am the chair of the Finance Committee, and you might know we've had a really tough year this year. And we spent a lot of time looking at budgets and struggling over what programs to save and what to do. And it's so inspiring to remember that the reason we did all that is so that we can have the kind of programs and launch the kind of students that are here today. So thank you for reminding us about why we do this work, and that we can feel proud of the budget we put together, because it allows students like you to go and learn about the world and come back and share it with other students too. So thank you for going, and good luck to you next year. We'll look forward to hearing all about your experience.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you thanked the school committee so many times. I wanted to suggest that the people you should really be thanking are the citizens of Brookline who pay taxes to Brookline, because it's their revenues, not our revenues, which enable us to enable you to do this wonderful program. I also was thinking when you were talking that at times the tensions between China and the United States probably are high, and that some of the personal relationships that you have created there could well be key to communications later on a person-to-person basis in order to try and reduce those tensions. And you never know when those are going to be important. So I thank you very much, but I won't also thank the citizens of Brookline, who are really the main people. Thanks a lot. Dr. Lupini.
So, Ms. Stevens, thank you very much for bringing back this wonderful gift from my great friend Kevin, I suppose, right? Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm going to take you up on that offer to come up and hear some of those stories. And actually, the very first story that I want to hear has to do with this particular picture. That'll be the first one, okay? I'm sure there are many others, but that one I just need to know, okay? Thank you very much. Excellent. Yes.
So
Thank you, Mr. Lindblom.
it's relevant that you're all here, because we have next on our agenda one of your colleagues, a student report, and I want to introduce Jonathan Yu, who's sitting next to me, who is our new student representative. We're so excited to have him and to encourage him to participate fully, and which I know he will, because I've already talked to him about that. And he will bring us some messages from time to time from your headmaster, and he will no doubt bring some messages from himself as he hears what we have to say, whether he agrees or disagrees with that. So we're looking forward to that, Jonathan, very much. We'd love to hear your report for tonight, and we'd also like to hear, if you're willing, a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really honored to be on this body. I really don't know what to expect, because this is my first meeting. But yeah, it's been wonderful so far. Thank you for the warm welcome. So I'm a junior at Brookline High School. What do you want me to say about myself?
You don't have to say anything else. Give your report.
All right, well, my report. So first up, prom was this Monday, and Ms. Holman said so herself. It was a big success. After the prom party was great, and there were no major incidents, which is good. She would like to
Bravo, right?
She would like to thank the parent volunteers and the faculty who helped out, at prom and at the after the prom party. Second up is the dress code, which was proposed by faculty council and brought to legislature. That'll be an ongoing discussion in the upcoming year. BETCO, which is a student drama group at Brookline High School, did a little piece today about the dress code, and afterwards there was a talk back that was very interesting. And finally, the new tech policy at Brookline High School, SMARTS. Ms. Holman has also said that that has been a big success, and she's going to implement that permanently for next year.
Great. Ms. Chalupsky, yes, please.
I'm very curious about the dress code. What is it that is being proposed?
I actually have the bill in my backpack if you want to see it. But the idea
Just in
is
general, it doesn't have to
is
be,
the 6 B's. No backs, no breasts, no butts, no.
Okay. What are the other 3?
Those are double.
Yeah, and kind of creating a professional, feel, because the school is kind of like the student's workplace, and everyone needs to dress appropriately. The faculty come to school dressed differently than they would if they were just to go out for a walk, or to a party, and I think that it's true that the students also need to do the same thing. So we're going to be talking about that more in legislature and student council.
Actually, it would be interesting if you'd pass that around if you have the legislation, just so we can see it well.
Can I just caution that this is exceptionally preliminary? It's not been discussed
sure.
with legal
No, I'm just
counsel
curious.
at all yet. So let's make sure that's on the record, please.
I understand. I just thought it would be interesting to see what, as it's being developed.
Maybe, Jonathan, you could, so that you don't have to pass it around, you could send Dr. Lupini, or have somebody send to Dr. Lupini a copy of it, and then he can distribute it, or Ms. Coyne can distribute it. Okay? That would be good. I'm going to be interested to see whether there are any mentions of bow ties. Right.
It's not one of the B's.
That's one of the B's.
Right. Well, I thought it was, right? Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. And we are now to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. You want to let them go?
Okay.
We'll break here for a moment. Thank you for coming.
Did you get a chance to see this?
So you should have a copy of the written report. It looks similar to what I distributed as a draft earlier this week, with one, I believe, additional item. But first and foremost in this report, and I'm not going to read from this text. I want to introduce our new Dean of Students at Brookline High School. It has been my pleasure over the time that I've been here to have opportunities from time to time on various initiatives or on issues. And in terms of one of the classes I teach, to work with Anthony Meyer, who I have believed from pretty much the moment I met him was someone who we wanted to have in one of our leadership roles at this high school and in this district. And I can't tell you, Anthony, how thrilled I am that you're moving to this position of Dean of Students, and how many people have stopped me and said to me how thrilled they are that you are moving to this position. Anthony Meyer is truly one of the great promising, I think, young administrators in our system and around, and I'm just so pleased to see you moving to this role. So Anthony Meyer, the new Dean of Students at Brookline High School.
So, thank you so much. I'm humbled by this opportunity, honored. Thank you, Dr. Lupini. Thank you to you, the school committee members. I've been at Brookline High School for the past 9 years, first as an English teacher, and then the last 6 as an associate dean. But I want to have a quick tangent and tell you a little bit about Jonathan, because he's a little more humble than maybe he should be. Jonathan Yu is an incredible student at Brookline High School, hardworking, community-oriented. He's been involved in student council and legislature. He has, as you can tell already, this incredible aura about him of kindness, but I'd also say he's deeply analytical, smart, and you're fortunate to have him as a member of the school committee, at least for, is it just a year appointment? Is that the idea?
Well, he graduates, doesn't
Right. We are planning to graduate, Jonathan, you. That is the plan. Jonathan, would you like to graduate in June 2014?
Yes.
Good. And otherwise, to just say, before coming to Brookline, I worked at a coalition of essential school in Devens, Mass, called the Francis W. Parker Charter Essential School, one of the longest names in educational history. And in the Seattle Public Schools, I taught English at Franklin High School. Before that, worked in Costa Rica and Honduras doing English language teaching and nature guide training in Honduras and kind of a funky conservation project. So about 10 years of experience before Brookline, and then the last 9 just feel like I found home from the moment I came into Brookline High School, into the Brookline schools. My daughters are at the Runkle School, a 3rd grader and a kindergartner, just having the years of their lives in school. Of course, it's the kindergartner's first year in school, but so I love Brookline, and I'm just happy to be here and to work with you guys for a long time, so thank you. Tough questions?
Questions, please.
Here come the tough questions, right?
No, I asked Anthony tough questions years ago, and he was very helpful in answering them at the time. So Anthony and I met when we both served on the interview committee out of which the hire of Ann Wilson came, and Anthony was a wonderful member of that committee, and just you were talking about the aura around Jonathan. You also had an aura around you of kindness and competence and attention to detail. And I have to say, just on a personal note, that my daughter Katie's public speaking class was the class that Anthony was taken to by Deb Holman as part of his interview, finalist interviews, and I understood both from my daughter and from Deb Holman and from Anthony afterwards that Katie peppered him with some very tough questions.
Right.
So my family has already peppered you with
Okay,
tough questions, so I'm
great.
not going to do it here, but you were wonderful, and Katie came home and said, "Mr. Meyer has to be dean. He'd be such a wonderful dean." So,
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Anyway, so really thrilled for you.
Thank you. And that was a fun opportunity. So part of round 2 was to visit one of Elon Fisher, just a terrific Caverly Award-winning English teacher, to visit one of his public speaking classes and deliver an opening assembly speech. Jonathan, it may look a little similar since I've done the work already for you, for your class next year. But so it was a neat opportunity to deliver sort of sample speech and answer some questions. So thank you, Rebecca. It was a neat part of the experience. Ms. Kershaw.
Ms. Kershaw.
Hard one.
Good.
So tell us one thing as Dean of Students that you want to make sure stays the same, and one thing that you would like to see change.
Great, good. I think Brookline High, like any good school, is built around knowing kids well. And as you all well know, we are a growing district and we are a changing district. We've had a number of changes at the high school. Our headmaster, this is her first year. Our assistant headmaster, I believe, has been with us for 4 or 5 years. We're going to have a new Steps to Success director. So a lot of change, a lot of growth in the next several years. And I think at the heart, Brookline High School needs to continue to know kids well and to support them. And I think Pablo said it best in terms of realizing their capabilities, realizing the power of them, helping young people realize their power and capability. So I think at root, knowing kids is what our work is about, knowing how they should grow academically, how they need to grow socio-emotionally. So that to me is a kind of general about school culture. One thing that needs to change, I think we need to offer better after-school support in some ways than we do currently. We have a detention program which is punitive in nature and is not the point. So there are certainly times when we need to give students detentions, but I think helping students make good decisions from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. about how they manage their time and their work so offering that kind of support. And then clarifying our student supports. As you all know well, we have myriad supports at the high school, but I think being clearer about what they are, how students access them, how we coordinate them, how we monitor supports and use them so that I hate to use the word efficiently, but I think that's true. We need to be careful about how our supports are utilized. So that, to me, is an important for us institutionally to think a little bit about what our supports are and how we can best optimize them. It's, to me, not exactly a change, but a really important move to make in the next year or so. So I'm excited to be a part of that process. So, thanks for your question.
Ms. Scotto?
Just a quick question. Tell us something about yourself as a teacher.
I'm an English teacher, so I love to hear students' thoughts. I love to ask a good guiding question and open the discussion and watch kids work with the text and support their ideas with evidence, and perhaps even more importantly, to foster students' abilities to make connections between themselves. So as a teacher, I like to certainly be present and frame discussions, but also reseed and let the people who really need to be doing the hard work, not the teachers don't need to be doing hard work, but let students work really hard. So, thank you.
Ms. Ditkoff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking on this role. I'm a big fan of the CES model, so I'm curious when we're getting block scheduling at the high school.
Good. Well, I don't know that we've.
I'm kind of kidding.
Okay, good. I was going to say, getting collaboration time, as you know.
Scheduling's a problem. So
Right.
I'll write that down.
We're not getting block scheduling. No, I'm just curious, are there principles that you think are particularly interesting or effective that maybe not in the next 5 minutes, but over time that you could imagine the high school taking better advantage of?
I think just the idea of faculty having a clear and established voice in decision-making is really important and hard. I mean, a school like Parker, we have 360 students across 6 grades. It's much more complex to imagine the CES model at a school like Brookline High. That said, I think making sure that we're tapping into the faculty and making sure that they're a part of making decisions as well. And my sense is that is happening, that's important to Ms. Holman as well in terms of using faculty council, hearing about the dress code, for instance, what they would like in terms of that. But that's another one that comes to mind that I think is really important. Great, thank you.
Uh-oh.
Mr. Yu?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for all the work you do. It seems like no matter how busy you are, you're always available to me and to all the other students. And I love your deadpan humor and all of your speeches.
Are you suggesting that I sometimes make jokes, Jonathan?
And yeah, you've just been a wonderful presence at the high school, and thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a mutual admiration society, so thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. And that's the point, right, is being accessible to students and knowing them and helping them grow. So that's the great joy.
So, Dean Meyer, thank you very much for considering Brookline your home and for being willing to become dean and for doing the work that you do, which we know is the most important work to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. I really appreciate it, and thank you to all of you. Okay.
Thanks, Anthony.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Dr. Lupini. Thank you. I'll need it.
And Anthony provided me with this great transition to the Steps to Success Director search. That was nice of him. We believe we have 5 finalists for that position. We are looking at interviews during the week of the 17th. I can't remember the exact dates at this moment. We are also spending some time early next week with the Student Leadership Council, with the staff, and with the Parent Leadership Council prior to starting those interviews. And I expect to be able to name the next director by the 28th of this month. We've provided you.
Bill, I have a quick question. I know Onita Horn was the interim step to success. What role will she be playing afterwards?
Let me try it this way, because we haven't made names of finalists public. Let me try it this way. We don't hire interims ruling out the possibility of their interest in the permanent position. We do have internal applicants, and we do have internal applicants who will be named finalists. How's that for now? But Onita, remember, has been holding down two roles. So she's been the interim director, and she also continues with some outside support that the board provided her with to do the college counseling, college outreach piece. We will need both of those roles in the organization as it moves forward.
That's great. I was on the same panel as her for the Brookline Community
Yeah.
Foundation, and, I thought she was tremendously poised for her age and a great asset to Brookline.
So Dr. Allen, who's also not able to be here tonight, and I are members of the Onita Horn fan club as well, in that we had a difficult situation when that position became open, and she stepped in and kept doing both roles, and into a role that is difficult. It's not school, it's not community, it's a lot of different things, and picked up those pieces in a tremendous way. Did a great job with a fundraising event. Did a great job with an end of the year event. Great job in terms of working with students and staff, and also as I was there that evening, handled herself exceptionally well with a great community conversation around a report that's come out from the community fund.
I'm very happy that she is being considered. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Stone?
I'm sorry to keep on interrupting you on this topic, Bill, but.
That's okay.
Can you just describe how the new board of directors is being
Sure.
involved in the process?
I believe there are 3 or 4 members of the board who are on there were members of the board who were on the initial interview team, and there will be, I believe it's 3 members of the board. We haven't finished that piece yet, but I believe there are 3 members of the board who are on the finalist interview team. We've provided you with a little bit more detail after the discussions at town meeting and the work that Mr. Simmons has been doing around school security. I'll go briefly through these. The main issues that we've been trying to address, given the monies that have been put forward through town meeting. Again, thanks to Sean Cronin for addressing these issues, addressing some extra appropriation following the incidents across the country earlier in the year when we were able to take a look at some of our security measures. So we've taken a look again at exterior doors and cameras, better cameras at front entrances, as well as at some of our other doors that are locked. So it won't be just our main entrance that will have cameras, and the only door that all doors will be locked. The door that will be able to be accessed via the system in the office will be that front door. There are a couple buildings where it's actually more than the one door that the office will control and be able to open during the day. And we're doing that on a school-by-school basis. One of the major parts of this project is to make sure our classrooms can be locked from the inside, and yet if a student or someone else were to lock themselves in, we can key them and get into the room. But that's not true of a number of our classrooms in many of our schools right now. It will be by the end of the summer. We have looked at additional automated swipe lock systems on the buildings. We're adding to that number at almost every building. where there'll be additional places where teachers can swipe their way into the building if they're out for recess or whatever it may be. So there will be a lessening of the need to prop open doors, which we still experience from time to time. One issue that we're going to be discussing with Policy and Capital Subcommittee is at least one instance where we believe we're going to recommend a camera in a building, and it has to do with the distance and the accessibility of the office to that front door, and we want to be able to monitor when people come into the building. There's only one, maybe a second building where we may make a recommendation like that. We want to make sure the policy's clear on it. We want to make sure that Capital signs off on it before we make any of those moves. And we've taken a look back. This is a no-cost item at our procedures for lockdown, for evacuation with the police department. Tried to put some additional measures in place where teachers can have some options at times, rather than it being, if there's any lesson learned from some of the more recent incidents, it's that teachers need to have some discretion if they happen to be in one part of the building versus another building to make judgments on their own. This is something that our police department's pushing, that's actually being pushed across the country, and so we're trying to build that into some of our drills and procedures as well. So again, we're very pleased with Charlie's work on this with our principals. Those principals with, I believe, at least their school councils, if not going beyond that. And these are things that we'll begin to be putting in place over the next few months. I'm going to do these item by item tonight. Yes?
Can I,
Ms.
do you mind if
Charlevsky.
I?
That's fine. No, please do.
So I think this is all, unfortunately, good that we have to have this. However, I continue to worry that there's always the possibility of locking children out of the building, and that's the thing that, the people who need to get in sometimes might not be able to get in. Kids out at recess, doesn't hear a teacher call or something like that. What happens?
So there are at least that front door, and in many of the bigger buildings, there'll be a second door, and in some cases even a third door that will have some kind of a
visual
camera and some kind of ability to
kids
ring
are
the
told
office.
that, the kindergarten
I
kids.
can't answer that
No,
per
but
se,
I guess, what I'm trying to say is I think that.
but I believe these procedures will be communicated pretty clearly throughout the building to all of the teachers and to their students.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else on this, Ms. Scotto?
Ms. Scotto.
Sorry.
I'm curious about the standard key capable of locking any classroom door. So if you have a standard key that can lock any classroom door, the assumption has to be that it can also unlock.
Not necessarily a standard key.
Okay.
What I'm saying here is that every door in the building within the classroom can lock. I don't know them to be a standard key. Does it say that within what Mr. Rowe provided?
Well,
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll try to answer your
No,
question.
I think it's important that it not be a standard key, because if it's a standard key, and you can both lock and unlock the door with it,
Yeah.
and everybody has a standard key, that means you have no security in certain ways in the building.
So I don't believe everyone has the standard key. I'll check this with Mr. Simmons, but again, without getting into too much of this
Right.
detail, I believe that teachers have a key to their door, but I believe there is also a standard that will do any of the doors that the office
Right,
controls.
that the office controls.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it has typically been, yeah,
I think that's what Mr. Simmons means by this reference.
thank you.
Ms. Ditkoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One objection that was raised at town meeting, and I don't know where we were on it, was that there was glass on many of the external doors so that you could break the glass and open just push bar the door from the inside. So what do we think about that?
We think, yes, they can. And I know I have some colleagues in some districts where the same kinds of objections have been raised, where the point that's been raised is we should get rid of all the glass, or we should replace it with bulletproof glass or whatever it may be. Some people have even gone as far to cost that out.
Or replace the push bars was the other. So have it such that you can
Oh.
still have glass, but not that you can.
I'm sorry, I haven't heard that objection. I didn't interpret it that way. I haven't heard it raised necessarily about the push bars. I've heard it raised about if I can break glass, I can open a door.
Well, if you can break glass, you can jump in. The point was
Right.
that
Right.
so we're leaving that.
Yes.
I mean,
Jonathan?
So on a related note about doors, at Brookline High School, there's a major hallway, and there's a door inside the hallway, like a fire door with the electromagnets keeping it open, and the one of the magnets is broken, so the door stays shut, and it kind of obstructs the traffic. And I talked to Mr. Mason about it after a couple students brought it to my attention, and he's been trying to fix it for years. And I don't know if this is the right time to bring it
As
up.
good a time as any, Jonathan.
But yeah,
No, it's fine. If you just, yeah, we'll talk afterward, and I'll make a note and talk with someone separate from Mr. Mason about making sure it gets done.
All right.
Okay? Jonathan, however, does remind me that there are very few references to the high school in here. I mean, we are looking at making less doors accessible from the outside during the day. That will happen. We haven't identified exactly how many that will be or which they will be, but there will be less doors. You'll be able to go out all the doors because of the open campus. You won't necessarily be able to come in all the doors. And we're still working on exactly what that plan will look like. You have a copy here of the EDCO third quarter report. I pointed out here that I think Colleen Dolan does a really good job of providing you with an overview of programs and initiatives offered through the collaborative in these quarterly reports, which are required by the new legislation. And you have a copy of the third quarter report here. I listed just the 7 areas, I won't go through them again, that are to be addressed in the report that comes from the Special Commission on Education Collaboratives. I now have the draft version of that report. It's not a public document yet, but probably the next time we're together, I'll be able to provide you with the recommendations. I will tell you, as I think I have before, that there's nothing earth-shattering in there. Just to comment on one issue, on 2 issues. There is some talk about trying to figure out a way to make a lesser number of organizations for delivering some state initiatives, but not by doing away with any collaboratives, by sort of regionalizing them. I will say, however, one thing you should be aware of is just the legislation and the discussion that's gone on over the last year is causing a number of collaboratives to have conversations about mergers and has caused some collaboratives already to cease to exist. There are a few less today than there were a year ago. Some of them were specialty kinds of collaboratives built around the arts or whatever. They're out of business now. But there are more. There's a growing chorus of conversation around mergers of collaboratives where there's huge overlap. And EDCO is involved in one of those conversations where we have a collaborative where we actually share office space with. There are only 5 districts in the collaborative, and 4 of them are in EDCO. Why there's a need for 2 separate collaboratives there, I've never understood, and quite frankly, in light of the new legislation, I understand less today than I did before. So the only district that's different is Burlington, and they're more of a special education collaborative focus. EDCO has always been historically more of a professional development focus. It seems to me there's a good relationship that could be formed there. You're going to hear more and more of those kind of conversations, and I think that's a good thing. And the other thing is the issue of services for adults over the age of 22. I can tell you because I've told you before, the report will say that there are 2 or 3 collaboratives who are in that business. They are to be held harmless, that is to remain in that business. But there's a very, very high bar for collaboratives who may wish to go into that business in the future, involving the sign-offs of the appropriate agencies and organizations. It's a very high bar, and we think we've done right by the adults who are accessing services through those collaboratives now, and also right in making it a really difficult process for another collaborative to pick up that role. High school accreditation, I've informed over time Mr. Morris, Ms. Ditkoff, about conversations that have been going on, our involvement of which was spurred by feedback we heard from our leaders at the high school around the value added, or I guess I would say the lack thereof, of the NEASC process. We're involved in the conversation with a group of EDCO districts trying to engage NEASC in a conversation about improving their process, improving that value added to school districts. I was one of 5 people who met with NEASC representatives, that is representatives of their Commission on Secondary Schools, a few weeks ago to discuss those issues. We expect those conversations to continue. And in the meantime, Deb Holman and I have had a number of conversations, given the number of organizations out there that do accreditation, about looking at what actually is available to us, what kinds of processes we might want to look to in the future, either in place of or to supplement NEASC as something that would bring some value added to our high school. So we're in the very early stages of that. Some of the people who led the process here, Anthony, Brian Poon, others, are going to be intimately involved in looking at what some of these other options are, because there are many. They're going to take the next year or so to look at that, while in addition we're trying to talk with NEASC about making some changes to their process. Like so many other issues, it's a growing statewide chorus of school districts that are interested in making sure that what they're paying to NEASC, the amount of money that they're investing in the accreditation process, actually gives them something that helps with their improvement efforts. The last thing is we have our MSAN Governing Board meeting coming up in June, on June 17th and 18th, and I'll be in Chicago for that meeting with those colleagues. That's my report.
Other questions for Dr. Lupini? Hearing none, we'll move on. We have several proposed votes. I want to apologize. We're about 30 minutes behind schedule. The first vote has to do with the second reading of the school calendar, and I would like to go to a vote on that as quickly as possible, so I will just move that we accept the calendar that we've received, and if there's a second, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Kershaw, and of course, I'll be glad to have any comments or questions. Seeing none. Oh, Ms. Cox, right?
I'm just curious about whether there was any response or feedback to the letter that went out to the parent community about the calendar that you sent a few
My
months ago.
letter?
Right.
Thank you for that. There were two or three. One around the choice of the day for the collaborative time, and just one very interested and appreciative of that we were looking to work with any outside agencies in efforts around the first week of what normally would have been the first week of school, but isn't this year. And secondly, around those organizations, Adult and Community Education, the Recreation Department, and our extended days, who we continue to meet with, in terms of providing any kinds of programming during that earlier release time on Friday. But they were focused on those issues.
I think it was really helpful to get that letter out. I wonder if there are still members of the parent community who might not know that this change is coming, and what other efforts will be made to publicize that there's a large change coming.
We did send that to everyone. We will send it again. And Mrs. McHugh is also, and it's up on the website, it has this one change that we made today to make sure I get this revised version there. Mrs. McHugh's also had a larger than normal number printed that we're distributing to all kindergarten families as they come for their peak and practice day, and that we're planning to distribute in a variety of ways. So we've actually done 2 or 3 times the number of color printed this year to make sure you can distinguish between the different days, to make sure we can better get that message out.
Great, I appreciate that. I think it's really important with a change like this that everyone be made aware, and not everyone, unfortunately, opens their emails. We can try, but
I've encountered that from time
to do
time, yes.
several alternative methods of reaching out.
Yes.
Ms. Chalupsky?
So I'm curious what sorts of possibilities there are for that first week in August?
A number of those, thank you for that. A number of those organizations are looking to run programming during that week. I don't know where exactly we are as of today, but in the first and follow-up meeting, Adult and Community Education was talking about continuing to run some of their week-long programs that they've run in the past or that they run during the summer, during that week as well. Recreation was looking at the same things. There were some issues with our facilities and how available they were, but we thought we could overcome them. And extended days we're talking about, and that's more of an individual decision, of course, but they were talking about what they might do. But the two main summer providers, at least I think they are, Adult and Community Education and the Rec Department, we're talking about trying to run programming during that week for people to be able to access.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? All those abstaining? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. The second vote is for the appointment to the EDCO Collaborative Board of Directors for the year 2013-2014. Our candidate is Dr. Lupini, and I would appreciate a motion to that effect. Thank you. And a second. Thank you, Ms. Scotto. Discussion? No discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, and for the Collaborative Advisory Council, Helen Charlupski is our candidate, and so I'll make that motion. Is there a second? Great, thank you, Mr. Chang. Discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Thank you very much. Very efficient. Appreciate it. Okay. We wanted to spend a little bit of time. Thank you, Rebecca Stone, as usual, for doing a nice piece of writing on behalf of all of us. I wanted to just make sure that everybody was up to date on what has been going on in connection with an override study committee. So as Rebecca explains in her document, the Board of Selectmen has the sole authority to propose an override and set its terms. Our current Board of Selectmen has moved ahead, and they have voted a charge, which I sent out to you, and which is at your, another copy of which is at your table. And they also established a chairman of that committee. Since then, the Board of Selectmen has come to the school committee and offered us an opportunity to select amongst ourselves one person to co-chair that committee with Dick Benka. And so that's one thing that we will have to do relatively promptly. They also offered us the opportunity to make suggestions regarding the override charge, and that is what we are asking you to consider and comment upon tonight. And they are also offering us the opportunity to make suggestions as to whom anyone feels we would like to reach out to, or like them to reach out to ask them if they would be willing to put themselves up for a membership on that override study committee. The selection of those people will be done through public interviews by the Board of Selectmen, and I don't know whether the Board of Selectmen will ask us to participate, but we could certainly ask for that, but maybe not. And in any event, the principal activity tonight is to ask you to make any comments on the charge that Rebecca has prepared for us. Ms. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know whether you all feel comfortable with this, but a number of members of the committee commented to me directly on the charge that the selectmen had already passed. And so what you have in front of you was my attempt to cull all of those comments and to address the concerns that were raised. And if you would like me to, I'm happy to summarize the concerns that were raised by the committee members, so that we don't necessarily have to go one by one. So the charge as it was passed, I'm just going to go through these comments without affiliation. There was a concern raised that the charge as passed read too much like the charge of the study committee would be an audit of the schools. And that's not what an override study committee is for, and certainly not what we would, while we are happy as we were in 2007, 2008, and before that to be looked at because of the structural challenges and obviously the pressure of the enrollments on the need for an override or overrides. Members of the committee felt that the charge itself needed more balance in that regard. There was included in the current charge an actual direction of and to the superintendent of schools, which is not something the selectmen actually have the authority to do, and so that probably would need to change. There was concern raised by the school committee members that the charge to the override study committee include a full review of future needs of both the town and the schools. So what Ms. Didkoff referred to earlier is a fully loaded estimate from the override study committee that includes not just what Sean Cronin talked to us about the unfunded liabilities, the future town concerns, but also looking at the school's future, not just in terms of the enrollment pressures, but also in terms of what we are trying to do programmatically as we move forward. There was a concern raised that the charge articulate the need to have the override study committee, present the consequences of an override failure. That was a very, very important piece of the 2008 override, was being able to present to the public. There's really no way to make up your mind about whether or not to support an override as a voter unless you know what the alternative is. If it fails, what does that mean? What do our schools look like? What does the town look like? What are the consequences? And so putting that into the charge seemed like a good idea. And finally, there was concern that the original charge, for some reason, splits what we call the due-by date for the override study committee between a recommendation for an override to meet fiscal 15 budget needs and other recommendations for the longer term that would come to the selectmen or to the town or whoever the override study committee reports to after the actual override had occurred. And that struck many members of this committee as an artificial distinction and one that was not helpful, especially if the override study committee is going to be looking at the future needs of the schools and the town, that those should be incorporated into any recommendation for an override with an explanation of whether or not they are immediate needs or future needs. But certainly we would prefer to see an override study committee giving one report that included both of those and not split its deliberations artificially into a report just for fiscal 15 and a report for the longer term. So all of those concerns were what led to the draft that you have in front of you, which also draws somewhat on the charge that would to the override study committee of 2007, 2008. Which began differently. The preamble in terms of why it was being set up, again, reflects the language from 2007, 2008, talking about the many issues that arose during the fiscal 14 budget deliberations, and especially those concerning enrollment pressures in the public schools. The rest follows, essentially just addressing all of those issues that all of you raised. in reviewing it, and largely leaving, I think what you will see here, and I certainly believe that the selectmen will see, that the vast majority of what they had in this charge remains intact. Some of the pieces are moved around a little bit. There were a couple of things in their bullet points that belonged actually in the deliverables section and not in the bullet points of things to be investigated. But for the most part, the charge is very, very similar to what they had. It's just slightly differently presented, and fixes those specific issues to a single due-by date, withdrawing the comment about directing the superintendent of schools in any way, and making sure that the future liabilities of the town as well as the future needs of the schools are included in the analysis.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stone. Lucid as usual. Do people have suggestions? Because I'd like to end up with a vote on this document to bring back to the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Morse, I don't believe we get to vote on this. I believe it's a discussion that we then send back with you to discuss with the Board of Selectmen. We can't vote on an override study committee charge.
Oh, I was only suggesting that we vote to take this back to the Board of Selectmen as our suggestions. But what I really want to clarify is that everybody is supportive of this document, and it should be brought back as our suggestions. If you don't, I don't really care about a vote, and nobody seems to have any problem with it, so maybe we ought to just leave it at that.
No, as usual, thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I'm being recognized to say something, as usual.
You're always recognized, Ms. Ditkoff.
Ms. Stone did an amazing job.
Absolutely.
Working her magic, and I want her magic wand one day. But I do think that the only piece that I think is important is that in that first bullet point, as we think about I'm not sure what the word is, it says evaluation of long-range financial projections, that's probably the place where if there are needed improvements or programmatic changes that we would envision that would go. I mean,
Right.
specifically it was on my mind, not to be opaque as technology, but that somehow that gets wrapped in there.
So that was absolutely implicit in including future needs and liabilities, and I think the selectmen have been gracious in suggesting that we could have a co-chair from the school committee to make sure that that's a part of it.
Great. Ms. Cotto?
If you look at the charge from 2007, it specified the number of residents that would serve on the committee. Do we have any idea how many people they have in mind to serve on the committee, where those people will come from?
So my discussions with the town administrator are that they believe it's a similar number. They're interested in a similar sized group, even though, one of the things that we've discussed, some of us have discussed here, that this group looks different from its inception, because that group was entirely made up of people from outside of the various committees, school committee, Board of Selectmen, but that even though they've started this out in a very different way, that they're looking at a similar number. Yes.
Yeah. Now look at you. One of my concerns, which in a sense has to do with the selectmen, is that in forming various committees, they often choose people from various town groups. For example, someone from the building commission, someone from whatever. I don't know if that's their plan here, but I think it's very important that there be a goodly representation of people in the town who have particular expertise or interest or I don't know. I'm concerned that it be too limited in
So,
scope. And
so our discussion even as recently as this afternoon was that the remainder of this group would look very much like the 2008 group, and that the recruitment or advertising for interested people would occur in a similar fashion to the way that occurred. In fact, they're in the process now of sort of preparing that notice to go out to people who, through the newspaper and other means to people who may be interested.
so people would apply for it.
That's correct, and then they'll interview, which is what they did the last time, and then named a group from there, and then in that case, they named 2 of those people as chair. We go into this structure with co-chairs, but they'll be naming the rest of the group. I think so.
Yeah,
You do need to vote
the co-chair.
I think you do need to do that. The co-chair.
We do you think we need to vote it at this meeting?
I would.
You would?
I would.
We haven't really had a robust discussion about that. I haven't had a chance to, could we do it on?
You could do it on the 25th.
25th, yeah.
I don't think they're going to be at a point where they're going to be interviewing or naming by then, so it certainly will work
Okay.
by the 25th. I wouldn't go beyond that.
Yeah, I would like to discuss that individually with the committee.
Right.
And if there are any committee members who feel like volunteering.
Now.
Okay. Hearing no objections, I gather that this wording is acceptable, and I will share that with the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morse. Also, I just want to say that please convey to the Board of Selectmen that we appreciate their willingness to listen to us on this matter and to make some changes in this regard and to open the process up to the school committee.
I agree. Thank you. And if any of you have thoughts regarding people who you think would make good members of the Override Study Committee, you can either send them to me, and I will send them on to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, or you can send them directly, whatever is your pleasure. Yes?
One suggestion might be, and I don't know if the board can solicit people beyond, but to have a couple people who were on the previous one be on this one, so that there's some continuity. I mean, they won't want to. Okay.
They are lining up for that.
Well, it's just a suggestion.
Aren't they, Ms. Kershaw?
Yes.
Perhaps we could prevail on some of the people who were on the original FPAC to take a.
Oh, that's different. That makes sense.
Clear.
You weren't talking about 2007, 2008.
FPAC is what I was thinking about.
Yes.
Yeah, because there were a number
I'm
of,
certain that Dr. Warren is sitting by his phone waiting for it to ring.
gee, and Dr. Lang.
And Dr. Lang as well.
And Dr.
Yeah, I
Lang
was
as
going to
well.
say,
Sure.
yes.
Sure they are.
Who's making that phone call?
Okay. Either send Chairman DeWitt or me any suggested names that you have, and you can check in advance if you think they'd be interested. It's a question of applying. We're only asking for suggestions of people who we would ask to apply, and they would be interviewed.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the verb is voluntold.
Voluntold. Good. Is there any new business before the committee tonight? Hearing none, I'm sorry.
What is new business?
New business is any business that is relevant to the school committee which has not been brought up during the course of the meeting that any member of the school committee feels should be.
And I have the dress code, the proposed dress code.
Great. Okay, we do have a need of an executive session. The executive session is to discuss strategy with respect to litigation because an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on their litigating position. So, Ms. Coyne, would you poll the committee?
Yes.
Have we covered everyone? We covered everyone? Okay. And just to say that we will not be coming back into session here. We will close out our session after the meeting. Thank you.